Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Stacey?
Max, this is our final episode here in Dublin at Keiser Report and EspanolConf, and we're going to turn to the second bit of that on-stage thing you did with the one of the heads of Coinbase. You talked to a great investor, Javal, and there was a CNN reporter, and she had followed up on a point you had made about Bitcoin being a store of value. And she was asking, what are the biggest hurdles of Bitcoin to maintain itself as a store of value?
Oh, I had a good answer to that. Let's check it out.
Well, the adoption rate, that's what we're talking about. So a company like Coinbase has brilliantly created an on-ramp. People can get into crypto, and they're opening thousands and thousands of accounts, and they are providing that experience. I think that in the future, the adoption rate will be driven as it has been since the white paper makes reference to the banking crisis of 2008, the Genesis block. And I think that these banking crises will continue, and that will drive adoption. Clearly, in the fringe economies like Argentina, Venezuela, they are mad about Bitcoin because their economies are in free fall. Those are peripheral currencies. When you have a major currency like the dollar, the yen, the euro, the pound enter a similar crisis, which I believe will happen, you'll have then adoption rate in those countries will spike as well as a way to store a value, as a way to preserve wealth, because the banking system is completely unsustainable. It will not exist as we understand it in 10 years' time. It will not exist. Central banks are an endangered species.
I might take a more moderated approach to that. I think a lot of that could be said to be true.
Are you going for a job at a central bank? Is that why?
So like Max said, Coinbase works hand in hand with government. So I think one of the big things that's holding back this industry right now is lack of regulatory clarity. In the U.S., where Coinbase was founded and we operate in, is a great example that we have 4 different regulators that all regulate cryptocurrency is something different. The IRS says it's digital property. FinCEN, a Department of Treasury, calls it currency. The Commodities and Futures Trading Commission calls it a commodity, and now the SEC is likely calling it a security. And the honest answer is that it's a little bit of all, because it's a technology that allows different applications and use cases, and they all resemble different forms of financial instruments. So from our perspective, we look at Coinbase's mission is to help fiat currency enter this ecosystem. We have to be the on-ramp. We have to work with kind of safe, trusted counterparties like banks and regulatory agencies. The lack of clarity and the kind of ad hoc approach, not just in the US, but internationally, look at Europe, look at Asia, look at parts of Latin America, makes it very difficult for businesses to succeed. It's ultimately achievable. It's going to be a hard process.
Max, at a point?
Right. So Coinbase rightfully has said that they work with governments and they have a great solution and an on-ramp. There are industry players that have chosen not to work with governments, who have chosen to not interact with regulators, or to interact the least possible way with regulators, or to go jurisdiction shopping. So they'll go to countries where their money is welcome, their business is welcome. And so I think there's a dynamic evolving. I think that ultimately the regulators, in my view, are not really going to be helpful in the development of this industry in a strategic way, and that this is a self-regulating new asset class that we don't need those regulators. So I think that's an issue going forward. Obviously, that's a bit of a controversial issue. And again, Coinbase is a brilliant company and they do brilliant work. But I think that there's ongoing tension between crypto and regulators.
Jalad, would you like to be the judge of this debate? Should we bring the regulators in early on to make sure they don't come in later and just disrupt the whole thing?
I've been a proponent, and I have been kind of educating regulators. People consider that a bit of an oxymoron, but for the last few years around the world. And I think it's better because they are going to step in. I think the industry showed last year that they weren't very good at self-regulating. That's starting to correct. But given kind of the ICO scams of last year, that really woke up regulators who may have been more quiet on that front. So I do believe that there's this push and pull, though, and if you see cases like China, which shut down crypto, apparently, I mean, that you go there and there's still a lot of mining and trading happening through other means. I don't think you can just shut this down. It's like this whack-a-mole, you know, it's like you whack it in one place, it's going to pop up somewhere else.
Is it then better to involve the regulators in the building process of this thing?
Well, I don't know if the building process necessarily. I mean, they're not technologists. I think we need to educate them on what this is about and the fact that they can't ultimately control this. I mean, this is decentralized. This is global. I remember I was in India during demonetization, and the price of Bitcoin was like $1,000, and back then the price wasn't that high. It was $1,000 more in India just because of what Max said, the demand. When people stop trusting their governments, and that happens on a regular basis, they're going to go to an option like this.
There's two points. One is it's uncontrollable in a lot of ways. The second point is that the regulatory community hasn't really earned our trust. You show me a regulator, and I'll show you an extremely corrupt organization. I mean, look at the banking system in the U.S., a bank like Wells Fargo. Openly steals from millions of customers. They get a slap on the wrist. J.P. Morgan, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of fines for outright fraud. No regulators. Bernie Madoff was reviewed by the SEC 3 times. They saw nothing wrong. These regulators are weak. They're captured. They're ineffectual. They're corrupt.